Good morning, Dan and Amy and Jeff Flake. You know, it's funny, Jeff Flake's speech yesterday before basically an empty Senate chamber.
I know. Where did everybody go? Hey, where is everyone?
It was interesting because the Trump comment, the S-hole comment, and about more from Norway as opposed to from African countries, whatever he said in that meeting about a deal on dock and border security. The thought was, well, he invoked Norway because he had just recently met with the Norwegian president.
Prime Minister, yeah, whatever.
And so here's my supposition about Jeff Flake.
Okay.
I think the impetus for this speech was that Jeff Flake is leaving the Senate.
And he's of Norwegian descent?
No. I think that he recently saw Darkest Hour.
Oh.
And he thought he would have a Churchillian moment to deal a death blow to President Trump, who's become a rival, to rousing ovations and rallying the country to something important. You tell me, listening to this high-minded rhetoric and comparisons to historic despots, murderous regimes like Stalinist Russia, if that isn't the case.
It was a year in which an unrelenting daily assault on the constitutionally protected free speech was launched by the same White House, an assault that is as unprecedented as it is unwarranted. The enemy of the people was how the President of the United States called the free press in 2017. Mr. President, it is a testament to the condition of our democracy that our own president uses words infamously spoken by Joseph Stalin to describe his enemies. It bears noting that so fraught with malice was the phrase enemy of the people that even Nikita Khrushchev forbade its use, telling the Soviet Communist Party that the phrase had been introduced by Stalin for the purpose of, quote, annihilating such individuals, unquote, who disagreed with the supreme leader. This alone should be the source of great shame for us in this body, especially for those of us in the President's party, for they are shameful, repulsive statements. And of course, the President has it precisely backward. Despotism is the enemy of the people. The free press is the despot's enemy, which makes the free press the guardian of democracy. When a figure in power reflexively calls any press that doesn't suit him fake news, it is that person who should be the figure of suspicion.
For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Kevin Williamson, a roving correspondent for National Review. And by the way, sat down and did Against the Current interview with Kevin Williamson a few weeks back when he was in Chicago. So you can get that at upstream-ideas.com. Always good to have Kevin on. Kevin, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning.
Morning. So I know you're not the biggest Trump fan, but is
No, I'm not.
is it fair for Jeff Flake to intimate that Trump is just a mere 20 million murders away from being Stalin?
Well, I don't think that's exactly a fair reading of what Flake said. He's criticizing him for using the same terminology, and presumably underlying that terminology is some similar thinking. I think that you do have to be careful when comparing people or even bringing into the conversation figures like Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, whatnot. But it is worth noting the history of the origins of phrases and of ideas, and I think that is entirely fair. I think maybe the Norwegian he had in mind was Ibsen, though, who wrote a play called "The Enemy of the People," and so that might have been on his mind.
But you also
broader subject, of course, Trump is pretty bad on the subject of the press, and it's not just the fake news stuff and the tweets and things. He has suggested, for instance, changing the libel laws in ways that would make it more difficult for journalists to operate and easier for politicians to silence them. So this is something that we should be paying attention to. It should be criticizing, and I think that Flake is doing the right thing in doing that.
So you really, you embraced what Jeff Flake was saying yesterday on the Senate floor?
Not all of it. I think that Flake was saying what he thinks. I don't believe all of it. I don't believe all of anything anyone says in the Senate. I happen to be in Washington right now, which always reminds me of that fact. But I think Flake is saying what he honestly believes, and I think that on the general point of Trump's attitude toward freedom of the press and toward the press as an institution, he's right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so here's the thing, though, and I agree with you about Trump's statements about tightening up libel laws, or well, frankly, expanding libel laws actually is a better description. But I mean, Trump thrives on the press. All he does is watch TV. He wouldn't have anything to do, really, if he didn't watch TV and respond to the press and tweet about the press. So don't you see this as more showmanship than a tilt towards authoritarianism or constraining a free press?
I think it's always a mistake to people make excuses for Trump, right? So if he does something stupid, he does something outrageous, hey, it's just showmanship. He's the president of the United States of America. We have to take him seriously. We have to take seriously what he says and what he does. It's the same thing with his, sort of personal petty venal corruption. You're bragging about buying and selling politicians in New York. Well, he's a businessman. That's what one has to do. He's the president of the United States of America. We have to take his character seriously.
All right. Let me move on to a couple of pieces you wrote for National Review, and I need you to kind of square the circle here because on the one hand...
We're going to talk about porn now.
On the one hand, you characterize Trump as the porn president and building off of this story coming out about Stormy Daniels and the payoff to this adult film star and the allegations of a relationship between her and Trump and all that. And on the other hand, you have a piece about Trump being the first sitting president to speak at the March for Life this weekend. So the porn president speaking at the March for Life.
Yeah. Well, actually, I don't think I mentioned Trump at all in my column about the March for Life. But yeah, I guess he is talking. So, good for him on that. I always have a bit of skepticism about people who have late life changes of heart on the subject of abortion, including ones who move in the right way. Mitt Romney was not always a very pro-life guy until he decided he wanted to run for president again a few years back and suddenly had a change of heart. If you haven't figured out what you think about abortion by the time you're 60 or so, I think maybe you haven't given the question enough the issue enough thought, rather. And Trump is one of those people who had a fairly late life conversion on the issue. So color me skeptical about his sincerity there. But on the upside, he is, as a functional matter, doing what you would want him to do. The sorts of judges he's appointed have been the sorts of judges you'd like to see appointed. The attorney general he's appointed is the sort of attorney general you'd like to see appointed if you care deeply about that issue. And he is, at the moment anyway, willing to invest some political capital in it. So good for him.
Yeah, but we just never heard his aha moment. Why he went from pro-choice to pro-life.
Well, yeah, and even if we did, would it matter very much? I mean,
well,
the guy's a snake. You can't believe a word that comes out of his mouth. He is a habitual liar. He could not tell the truth for 24 hours in a row if you put a gun to his head. He's just a dishonest, fundamentally dishonest person.
All right, well, let's talk about the porn president now then.
Well, I mean, wait, hold on 1 second on this, though, because...
Well, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing about that story where I would expect him to be more honest, because if there's one thing about Trump, it's that he has never made much of an issue to keep his sex life a secret, including his affairs and his adultery and whatnot. In fact, he had an imaginary friend called John Barron, whose job was to call up New York City newspapers and talk about Trump's dating life and his sex life and that sort of thing. So the only part of the Stormy Daniels story that rings untrue to me is Trump trying to keep it quiet rather than putting it on a billboard.
But eventually, I mean, she's did an interview with In Touch magazine, and it's gonna. Yeah. I mean, this might kind of explain. He was married to Melania for a year. I know. He was. Well, come on. He was married to Melania. They were just a year into their marriage when he allegedly had this affair. And what's the alleged payoff, or what can you tell us about
$130,000? Yeah.
To keep her.
Yeah, but so to your point, where does this go? This is like the attempt to resuscitate the harassment stories from the campaign with those three women that came forward, were on Megyn Kelly's show and so forth, and that went nowhere.
Yeah, I don't know. In terms of, is this a thing about Trump and his character and his personal escapades that people finally, get upset about or care about? I don't know. I'd be surprised. The people who are hardcore Trump supporters seem to have just decided they're not going to think about these things or talk about these things. I'd really like to ask Jerry Falwell Jr. about this, or Tony Perkins about this in public. These people who have really, really gone to bat for Trump, not only as, well, he's functionally useful to us from a purely political point of view, but arguing that he is a man of great moral stature, a great Christian leader, this sort of stuff. I mean, that stuff is unbelievable to start with. Yeah. But, some of those evangelical leaders and Christian leaders and socially conservative leaders need to be called on the carpet about this stuff.
Well, does he ever go to church? I know people would rip on Obama for not going to church, and sometimes he would. Does he? Does anybody know?
Yeah, he was asked about this during the campaign. I forget which church he goes to. I want to say it's a Lutheran church, because he mentioned talking about taking communion and saying that's the only wine he ever drinks because Trump is a teetotaler otherwise.
Yeah, not one of his vices. So here's now I know Bill Buckley, the sainted Bill Buckley, founder of National Review, did not have kind things to say about Trump when on the occasion that he wrote about him. But Buckley also said, conservatives need to do a better job of giving people room to come over to their side. And so, how do you, as sort of as you can tell, sort of an anti-Trumper, to be polite about it, how do you, as you were talking about, you give him credit for speaking the March for Life and for appointing judges and so on. How do you deal with who you think this guy is in terms of character? And what you see this guy doing in terms of, in many respects, advancing a conservative policy agenda?
Well, I'm not running for office. Recruiting people to come over to my side isn't my job. I just write what I think about things. Mm-hmm. So that's easy for me. I just tell people what I actually think about stuff as it happens. So I don't really have to think about it too strategically. I can speak and write honestly about who Trump is and what sort of man he is, and I can speak in right honesty about the policies he pursues as president.
Oh, all right, fair enough. He is Kevin Williamson, roving correspondent for National Review, and you're going to be at the March for Life, aren't you, Kevin?
I will be, yes.
All right, great. So we'll look forward to more of your musings on that topic. And again, at upstream-ideas.com, a long-form interview I did with Kevin a few weeks ago. You can check that out there. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.